Hello, everyone. Bob Thibodeau here. Welcome back to another Power Podcasting session. And I got something exciting for you today. This is something I've been using at least 3 years, almost on a daily basis. And it has worked perfectly. It's never failed me. And it is so easy to institute. I have to share it with you. And this is just a way for you to keep track of the topics you're going to be discussing for your podcast or business training, whatever the case may be. But you can use this. Now, full disclosure, I got this from a guy named Sean Mize. And when I first seen it, I don't have a super fast mind, but my lightning fast mind grabbed right onto what he was saying. I said, this is so easy to implement, so easy to understand. And like I said, I've been using it almost on a daily basis. I'd say 5 times a week anyway, for the last 3 years, and it's worked spot on every time. Okay, let's go ahead and I'll shut down this video and we'll share this screen. And you should be seeing the screen now. It's how to keep track of your podcast topics and develop ideas for your future programs. All right. And it is called a 10 by 10 matrix. That's the number one method I've found to do this. Now, what is a 10 by 10 matrix? Basically, it's an Excel sheet. That's all it is. You can use a sheet of paper if you want. I like having it online because it's easy for me to save and easy for me to access. But that's what we're going to be talking about today, is setting this up as an Excel sheet. And all you do, you have an idea for whatever your topic is, topic of discussion. And you put your first idea in column 1, your second idea in column 2, third idea in column 3, fourth idea in column 4, and all the way across. I call it 10 by 10. And some of the, in what I do is I have a separate Excel. You can have one master Excel sheet and just keep adding pages to it. And that's what I do. Down at the bottom, it'll be tab 1 would be, we'll just call this podcast training. And then, on the first sheet would be week 1 training. And, then my topics I want to discuss, in week 2 training, week 3 training. And these, since I do daily trainings on this, idea 1 would be the first day, and, second day, third day, fourth day, fifth day. And then what I'm going to discuss will be underneath. But this is just an idea. Let's say your subject matter is going to be how to lose weight. Well, first column, naturally, first thing that pops into mind is diet. Second one would be, you could also run and burn those calories off, or go to the gym and work out, or maybe you can't go to the gym, so you're going to do an at-home workout. Now, there's your main headlines, the day 1, day 2, day 3, day 4, and you just list it on across for 10. Like I said, sometimes I'll have 5 or 6 columns. Sometimes I'll have 15 columns. But just to keep it simple, I call it 10 by 10. So in this example of how to lose weight, you can put underneath that topic that you'll be talking about diet, cutting calories, eating more healthy, low-carb diets, salad-only diet. Right? So if you're doing a podcast episode on how to lose weight, that's your main topic, your main subject matter, then first you're going to be talking about diet, and you talk about cutting calories, and it just helps keep everything organized for you, right? So as you're talking, today we're talking about diet, blah, 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 blah. One of the major ways you do that is by cutting calories. You can cut calories, so, all this stuff, and then, just eat more healthy. And as you eat more healthy, some of these things, you cut out the carbs, you go to the low carb diet. See how you just kind of flow right down the list? That's exactly what you do. That's how you use this form. If you're going to be talking about running the next day, okay, well, there's jogging. There's a 1-mile run, a 2-mile run. You got fartlek training, which is basically interjecting spurts of high-speed running in between the slow jogs. And, before I got injured as a cop, I was running for 25 years. I mean, I was an avid runner. When I was in the military, I was running on average 12 to 14 miles a day. Not all at one set, but 3 or 4 times throughout the day, I go out for a 2-3 mile run, sometimes a 5-mile run. My wife hated it because, she finally got to see me on the weekend, and I'd cut grass, and that, after that, wasn't really much going on. I say, okay, I'm going to go out for a run, and I'd run 10 miles, come back a couple hours later. But I just loved running. And, so I could teach on that subject, and I've helped other people, pass their PT tests. I've helped people complete marathons, and the fartlek training is a way to do that. Let's say you're going out on a 1 mile run, and you're out on, you're running on the street, and you put in a good quarter mile, half mile just to warm up, and then you pick telephone poles. And you say, okay, every 5th telephone pole, I'm going to sprint 2 telephone poles. Okay. And that's what you do. Give it a couple 100-yard run, just as fast as your feet can go. And then you go for another 5, 6 phone poles, just jogging and catching your breath. And then you do it again. And you do that for a mile. And believe it or not, it really helps your time. But that's why I'm talking about the fartlek training, in case you didn't know what that was. So you're going to go to the gym. Well, there's free weights. You can hire a personal coach. There's upper body training, lower body training. All these things are topics you can talk about on how to lose weight with a gym workout. Well, what if you're not going to the gym? Well, then there's body weight workouts where you just use the weight from your own body. You can use videos to help you work out. You're working out with your personal trainer on video. You can go buy a personal weight set, or you just go walking. These are all at-home workouts. But as you're discussing them with your audience, you use this 10 by 10 matrix to keep track of what it is you're doing. Now, let's just switch gears a little bit and talk about gardening, right? If you're into gardening and you're going to do a podcast on gardening or a training on gardening, well, there's all sorts of gardening out there. Indoor gardening, outdoor gardening, greenhouse gardens, having gardens with sheds, greenhouses and all that. You got potted plants, you got vegetable gardens, and see how I just put number 7. You just keep these topics going. I mean, you could probably come up with 20 different ways if you're really into gardening, and each one of these would have its own column. Now, if we come back over to the indoor gardening, see you got seed plants, tomatoes, flowers, bulbs, and I could keep listing all those down. That's why it says subtopic continued. Now, how do you keep track of it? Do you just stay one column all the way through? That's one way of doing that. But you might be talking about indoor gardening today, and let's say you have a half-hour podcast, and you make it only a couple of sessions. Well, say Wednesday, you're going to move to outdoor gardening and start talking about that for a couple of topics, and then, having a shed and go on and so forth. Well, here's how I keep track of it. Now, if you're writing it on a sheet of paper, you can put a check mark next to it or cross it out. I just use the highlight feature. And when I talk about a topic on my podcast, I will highlight it. What does that do? That tells me that next time I bring that subject matter up, I may be talking about landscaping next week, and then after that, I might be talking about installing a brick wall, and the next week might be about gravel paths, and then I come back, so I'm going to talk about gardening again. And it's been a month or so since I talked about gardening. I pull up the gardening 10 by 10 matrix, and I know I've already talked about tomato gardening and bulb gardening and things like that, so I don't cover that. So maybe in this session, I'll talk about seed plants and maybe talking about flower gardens. And that's how you keep track of those topics. Highlight it, save it, and when you come back to it, it could be, months later, and you say, wow, man, I'm going to talk about, just pick one, outdoor gardening. What did I talk about before? Oh man, I got to go back and try and find that episode, see what I talked about. No, you pull up your 10 by 10 matrix for gardening, and you immediately see what you've already talked about. Isn't that great? That way, if you have listeners, what's that do? If you have these listeners that are like, wait a minute, he just covered that a couple weeks ago. Why is he saying it's? And if you're using the notes and the note outline, you'll be saying the exact same thing in the same order. Highlighting the same points. So your listeners, your avid listeners, are going to know that you messed this up. Right? You don't want that. You want to save yourself of that. Now, once you record your podcast, you can then repurpose your 10 by 10 matrix into other things. For example, Here we have, the same one I just showed you. You can take one box from one column and make a blog post for it. Okay, so you have your topics. I'll go back up here, and tomatoes. So you're going to talk about indoor gardening with tomatoes, and you make that into a blog post. Each little box represents a blog post. And the blog post has its own advantages, which I'll get into in a minute. But after you make the blog post for each block, then once you have those blocks filled, you can take each article and combine them all into an ebook on indoor gardening, right? You've got the podcast episode that goes with it. Now you have a blog post that goes with each column. You just take each one of those articles and combine them all into an ebook. Now you have an ebook to use as a giveaway, or you can actually sell it if you wanted to, sell it for $5 on, online or whatever. But I find it's a great way to generate some additional traffic by giving it away. And what have you done? You have that 10 by 10 matrix for your podcast reasons, right? And then you've got the 10 by 10 matrix. And you got your show notes from the podcast. So you just combine, create an article, a blog post to put on your website from your show notes. It just flows one into the other. And once you complete each column in the matrix, once that thing is completed, then you publish your ebook. And, like I said, you can offer it as a free bonus to your training programs. You can offer it as a standalone product. But when you get ready to complete the majority of the entire matrix for that entire niche, let's say it's, your 10 by 10 matrix for gardening, you might only have 7 columns across the top. Like I said, it doesn't have to be 10. But once you complete the majority of the entire matrix for that particular niche, or the entire niche, of course, put all of the information, blog posts and training into a physical book. Now you've got a massive book, several chapters, and that can be offered for sale as well. Again, the book is about gardening. And then you got one chapter on indoor gardening, and all of the contents from your ebook is in that chapter. And then outdoor gardening, all your contents for your ebook is in that chapter. And you just move right on through the list. You got a complete book already written for you, and you did it all because of your podcast. And you know what you're talking about because you use the 10 by 10 matrix to keep track of your podcast. So once you did all that, you got your physical book, your book published now. Don't forget YouTube. YouTube is a massive, massive advertising tool. Turn your articles and blog posts into training videos. All you got to do is turn the camera on, start recording, right? Let me come back over here for a second. You turn the camera on and say, "Hi, folks, I'm going to hear Bob Thibodeau here talk to you about indoor gardening today." And you just go right down the list. And you're making your recording just like I'm talking into the camera right now. And when you get all done, you say, "We'll talk to you next time. We're going to talk about outdoor gardening. Till then, bye." And you stop the recording and you save it. You put it up on YouTube. And it all started with that 10 by 10 matrix. That's the unique thing about what we're doing here is this thing works all the time. And like I said, when I learned this from Shawn Mize, my lightning fast mind grabbed a hold of it, and I could not. I couldn't believe how easy this is to use, and it works constantly. And that's the great thing. It just works constantly. Every time I pull it out to use it, it's right there, ready to go. Now, all you do, you create a keynote or a PowerPoint of your presentation as you get ready to do the video recording, kind of like what I'm doing here today. You record your voice over the presentation and then leave the video or load the video to YouTube. And then you share the YouTube link on your social media channels. Maximize your SEO ability by cross-linking all of your platforms. What does that mean? Well, very simple. Your podcast should link to your website. Your website should link to YouTube. And YouTube should link back to your podcast. You can just make this one big circle. All of them, you have to have a link to your book on Amazon. This, Amazon is great as well. All you have to do, go back to the podcast, because that's what we're talking about. You start off with your podcast, you get done doing your teaching on this is just training material here. You could do the same thing with interviews and all that. Okay, which next session is what we talk about, interviews. But on your podcast, you say, if you'd like to read more about this, go to my website, where I've written an article that talks about what we're discussing here today, indoor gardening or whatever. So then people go to your website. On your website, on the article to your website, you say, if you would like more information on this, go watch the YouTube video that I created, and here's the link for that. And then over on YouTube, you tell them, on YouTube, I went on a deep dive on this for my podcast. You can catch the podcast here, and you leave the link in the show notes on YouTube. And what that does, and as I said, don't forget to mention about, I wrote this ebook on Amazon, or the major book, and it's on Amazon. Here's the link to that so people can buy it. But the SEO, now remember, Google owns YouTube. So they love it when you are maximizing YouTube links. So they're going to promote, and the SEO, the way all that works, you got a great big circle running where everything is linking to everyone else, and it keeps it all in the family, right? So when your podcast links to your website links to YouTube, and YouTube links to your podcast, Google loves you. They are going to show you to as many people as they can. And if you do Google advertising, Google ads, do YouTube ads and Facebook ads to send them to your podcast and all that, I mean, folks, they're going to be finding you left and right. And it's all a result of the 10x10 matrix. And this thing, again, I can't give Sean Mize enough props for it, because this thing has changed my life, and I'm hoping that it changes yours as well. All right. So next time we're going to be talking about planning your recording session, but I'm going to focus on conducting interviews. When I made this, that's what I was going to do, planning your recording session. But I just in the past day or so, I really want to emphasize and help and give you some tips on conducting great interviews. Okay. So that's all the training for today. I hope you got a lot out of this. I guess you can tell I'm excited about it. Every time I share about the 10x10 matrix, that's probably one of in my prior training videos for the podcast training, the 10x10 matrix is the one that received the most comments from everyone. Just massive comments on this one video, because this is a great concept. It works so well. It's so easy to set up, and it keeps you spot on. You can come back 2-3 months later. I can go back and pull one out from a year ago. Now, sitting here on a certain topic, I can't remember the exact subtopics I covered, but if I open up that thing, they're right there. They're highlighted. I know which ones I've already talked about, and I can just pick something else. This is a great thing. You need to institute your 10x10 matrix. Like I said, I like using an Excel sheet. You can just write it out on a sheet of paper. What am I going to talk about? Running, okay. Jogging, column 1. Fast walking or speed walking, column 2. Short distance runs, track running, marathon training. All the way, and then subtopics underneath. You can write those out if you want. Like I said, I like using the Excel sheet so I can save it and come back to it months later if I need to. I don't have to worry, what did I do with that sheet of paper type thing. All right, that's all the time we have for today. I hope you enjoy this. I know I enjoy teaching it. If you're live right now, just stand by. We're going to stop the recording and then take live questions. If you're watching this on the recording, you can email me at brotherbob@ftfm.org or info@podcast-training.com. and I'll answer your questions for you. Go to the website, podcast-training.com. Take a look around, and we'll talk to you next time.